Got a comment, or how do we intro this? Well, hello. So this is Instable Performance Fabrication. Oh, no, not at all. Of course. Guess this height's fine. Ta-da, ta-da. All right, so it's been some time. I just watched my part 2 video because someone put a comment on it, and for whatever reason I left you guys off in the middle of a sentence. Doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense there, does it? So basically the sentence ended with the thing existed. It existed. So I went and checked my photos for timestamps. We got notes on these handy dandy pieces of metal right here. So I'm gonna try, so I watched the video a few times, so I tried to not hopefully say the same things twice. I'm sure I will. It's been some time since I did that one. So the HX Super 9 was made. So the very first time that I put a center cartridge into the housing and clamped it down, and I'm gonna cut and put photos in here. It was June 21st, 2017. I'll cut that out. So the very first time that I put the assembled turbocharger into a Super 9 housing, I'm going to put the pictures down when it was new. I still have that housing. It's on my 94. And it's all rusted now. The adapter ring's not even welded all the way around. It was literally just to try out the idea to see if it was possible. It was June 21st, 2017. August 29th, 2019. Is when I first clamped a turbocharger into it, so August 29th, 2019. And the first time that turbo was fired was the night of August 30th, the next day. Yeah, it's the 3-inch exhaust for the wind. Traction bars. Is a 9cm with an HX35 CHRA pump cover. All set up. And I staged it. And then proceeded to drive home. From there, I can't remember if I drove it home that night or not. But for context, I started getting into doing cast welding and repair of all cast types about June 21st, 2017. I'm going to put in some photos below, no timestamps, but they're old. I will timestamp the when the Superdome was made. So I'm pretty sure I left off was nothing existed that I liked, and the only thing that did exist that I like was involved an entire turbo swap. It's gonna beep again. Okay. So everything at that time that I really liked, as far as the only turbo that kind of existed that I really liked and that we were doing here as a shop, were 351 swaps. So we 351 swaps so many trucks. I talked about in the video how it was quite the task because the down pipes never fit. Charge pipes are a pain with 351, especially on a second gen. First gen, not too bad. Second gen, they suck because the compressor outlet, even at its lowest point, wants to run, after you adapt from 2 3/4 to 3-inch, wants to run right into the radiator hose. So you have to dive the thing down and then pull out of that dive and go into the intercooler. It was a bit of a, it took time to make that S pipe to make that work. So when the 9 was made, we kind of kept on the down low. It was kind of fun because I said a friend was over and I've been playing. I mentioned to him that I'm like, you can set these things together and it looks like for like 3 or 4 hours of work we could probably mangle Frankenstein this housing to the point where a 3540 would bolt in. And he's all, I'll cut it. Okay. Set them up and put them to work, cutting that housing to give it a go. So that's kind of how that all went, and from there started offering the housings with complete turbochargers. This is before I owned a balancer, and we weren't having really too many balance issues at the time. Now that I own a balancer, you get to see trends in parts. It seems maybe back in 2017, the stuff that was getting balanced by itself was actually pretty decent. It would come in, like I get to see it now when we put it on the balancer. The older stuff and then there's certain wheel sizes that they do runs on. Obviously they're making a bunch of these things, and they trend to be worse than some of the others. So like your 60 millimeters tend to usually be okay. If they're not okay, they're really far out of being okay, and if they are okay, they're usually within spec. Turbo wheels tend to do a pretty good job at least being at the minimum spec target. The 62.45s, almost always high. 67s tend to be like about 60%. They'll be pretty good. Either very rarely don't have to touch one, and most times it's pretty minimal work to bring them down to hard spec. But we got away with it at the time, making turbochargers without a balancer, and most of the stuff that we ordered in came from the same place, and all that stuff that came in at a target that was fine. I can't tell you what it was. They don't have a balancer at the time. So I was, you buy them online and they tell you they're fine. And then at some point started breaking in certain ways, and had to start looking into it, and we had a pretty good idea that there were intergranular fractures that were occurring due to harmonic frequencies. So I don't even remember where I was at. People can buy, UPS drop stuff off, customs needed extra money, and I didn't go re-listen to my video. But why it does, maybe we'll just go to, you guys heard about when it was created, the date, the very first one. Not long after, I went and took a HY35 housing and did the same thing to create the bolt-in. HX Hero. from there, it was pretty much just building those two housings for quite some time until I got the wild idea to take a HX30 6cm housing and modify that to fit, and that was the HX Hero 6. Basically found the limits of how fast you can spool a turbocharger. We'll have to go over the Hero 6 in another video. I think I fixed it as of late, but yeah, if you want to find out how much stress a turbine wheel can handle, you put it in the smallest housing you could possibly manage, and then put it on a bigger displacement motor and see what happens. It actually does really great. Up above 2,000 RPMs, things happy-go-lucky. It's when it makes big boosts down low, pulse amplitude, first drive pressure, just it's too much force on the turbine inducer and literally just works it back and forth just like you bend a piece of metal and breaks it off. If you wait till higher engine speeds before you bring up the boost pressure, they do great. Sitting here on the floor because it's off because the villain's on the truck right now, because the villain's one getting tested, not the 6. And next time the 6 goes on, it's probably going to have the new turbine wheel in it, and we'll see if that's has enough reinforcement on the inducer to make it survive. So there, maybe we'll go, why does the 351 style Hero housing work so well? The big part of it is the internal gate being on an angle. You see this if you look into the ETR and EFR turbochargers. They did the exact same thing, but if you go back and look at Holset, they actually designed this housing in I think 99. So if you compare that to when Borg and Garrett came out with their versions of that housing or style, the same idea of moving the internal gate, putting it on an angle, and having re-entry into the backside turbine housing with the flow of exhaust. It's just those two things. One, leaning the gate over increases gate efficiency. You can go look up external waste gate efficiency, and everybody has pictures of it of if you got flow, I can't see my hands. If you got flow this way, you put the gate this way, least efficient. You put it perpendicular, moderately efficient, put it on an angle, more efficient. And if you actually put the gate on the main flow path, and then you actually have you basically switch the routes and you feed it, and that feeds your turbocharger, that is extremely efficient. You'll see this on a lot of high-end race cars. The gate will actually have more priority than the turbocharger itself. So by leaning the internal gate over, you increase what the same size orifice will flow. And now the next magic trick is that you reintroduce it back into the exhaust gas on an exit vector that flows with the gas, and you dump it by the turbine wheel. When you do that, it creates a pressure depression behind the turbine wheel, meaning that although it is not a vacuum, what it is doing by taking high velocity, low pressure exhaust gas and moving it faster than the speed of the exhaust gas coming out of the turbine wheel and having that go down the exhaust, the downpipe, you're reducing the pressure on the backside turbine. When you do that, the turbine wheel starts to flow more. And it's pretty amazing how much more than it can flow when you do that. So you can take a turbine wheel, given the turbine wheel is operating within its design parameters, and reintroduce high velocity, low pressure, high energy exhaust gas with the same angle of it. Oh man, does that thing start to move. You'll see this on a lot of the compound kits on the like more high-end, I should say high-end, anybody can do it, but typically you'll see it from more of the high-end race shops and the compound kits. They will have the wastegates re-enter on the downpipe of the Atmo, and they'll have it enter either next to it on the outside, or they'll enter it into it on an angle. And that does the same thing. It'll help that Atmo plus the entire system flow more gas, and they start picking up power when you do that. So basically that's free energy that you can use to create this depression or reduction in pressure behind the turbine wheel to help that turbine wheel flow more. And that's what the HX40 outlet style or 351 style, an OEM 351 housing, or my Hero housings do. It is a wonderful thing to watch. That is how that tiny little housing makes 800 plus wheel. We've done 930 fuel only on a 5.9 and 840 fuel only on a 6.7. Again, that might be a story for another day. But yep, that housing can handle a 6.7 liter motor. All that happens is the RPMs, which peaks are at, all go down and the shaft speed's up. Basically, the shaft speed is going to be up at those higher RPMs, and then the other catch-22 is the increased displacement causes the housing to go into choke flow earlier. That's why the horsepower maximum reduces, you know, to 1458 or whatever, 1448 on nitrous, but fuel only, when you compare to fuel only, it's fun to see how the increased displacement actually lowers the total power capacity of the turbine housing. You see this with import cars that are 1.8 liters and 2.2 liters, 2 liters. They can get away with a lot smaller turbine housings, and in a lot of cases even a smaller turbine wheel because pulse amplitude isn't to the point where it causes choke flows to occur during exhaust open events. So the lower the displacement, typically the smaller the housing gets, and they can still make the same power as, and then the bigger displacement gets, the bigger the housing and or the wheel has to get to net the same flow. And you're looking at volumetric efficiency tables and choke flow, basically this air speeds through the turbine housing across the turbine wheel and then down the downpipe. So that's expansion ratio that you're getting into and stuff like that, which is fun. We're going to start measuring that on a friend's truck. We just put a pressure probe in the downpipe. We might even move it up into the housing, might drill and tap the housing to put it there to get it up real close to the turbine wheel. Right now it's up at the downpipe flange because we're going to start looking at expansion ratio. So we got dry pressure, then we have exhaust pressure and downpipe, and it's the same as doing a compressor ratio, but you're doing expansion ratio because it's a pressure map for the turbine housing, so we can start doing different things and seeing how it affects those two. It'd be cool to see if it does, if it follows with what all the turbine housing maps look like as far as how they come up on their expansion ratio. Then at about 3 they flatline, and then it's like 3, 4, 5, but that flow rating stop. And we should be able to see that. We should be able to correlate those things to what we're seeing as far as where peak torque's at, how the turbo's spooling, what are EGTs, what's power production, and then we have an AFR gauge for diesels that we did as a standalone that we'll be able to put on here. So we're going to be doing a lot more measuring, mainly because it's really fun to get to see how this stuff works. A lot of it's kind of, there's people doing it, but it's still kind of like behind the scenes stuff. We hope to get to do it and just show it to you. But yeah, it's kind of part 3 of the Hero, HX Super 9 Hero. Like I said, the first one that I ever did, that I still have, was August 29th. I probably actually finished on my birthday on August 28th, and then took pictures of it on the 29th with a simple charger in it, and probably got it on the 30th and started it up. I know the time that I put it on, I'm going to have photos that it's the same night that I started it for the first time. It was pretty cool. That thing staged right up against the converter. Just took it right to 2,000 RPMs. Just sat there, as happy as can be. So shortly after that, the bolt-in version, and then a little bit after that was the Hero 6. Can't really think of too much else. The Villain's literally brand new. I've only been making the Villain, which is an S300 turbocharger, using that same housing for probably 4 months now, 3 months. It's brand new, but the thing's a monster. And we're not even done with that yet. And, just like to do some more comparisons. I did a bunch of comparisons with the K27 to the Hero 9. Might go pick up another one. I'm waiting for someone to have a sale on one. Go get one. I think that's about it for part 3. Part 3 is more so just kind of going over why they exist and why they work so good. And when they came to fruition, the bolt-in one said it has a more traditional perpendicular gate, but the gate arm moves substantially further than a 12 centimeter housing. That seems to be helping that peak torque shape kind of mound out instead of being so pointy, which is helping it make it produce the same power as the 12, but spooling faster and producing more boost at all times, and maintaining EGT control at all times better than what the 12 does. And if you look at a 12 and you look at the space on the divider between the nozzle, the bolt-in 9 has more surface area or curtain area than the 12 centimeter does actually. So the 12 centimeter does a really good job of expanding the exhaust gas before it enters the turbine wheel, which helps keep the speed through that nozzle down. But the issue is that nozzle slot, because there's two of them and there's a big chunky divider in the way, that nozzle slot goes into its max speed zone quite a bit faster than a big open nozzle slot with no divider that's even taller. That helps get, like, the curtain area is not proportional. You can't have two curtain areas equal the same surface area of just one big one. It's like trying to say that two 2-inch pipes flow the same as a 4-inch pipe. The 4-inch pipe flows more than a 2-inch pipe. Two twos. Even though the two twos, if you have them together, is 4 inches, if you look at the flow volume that those two are capable of, the single 4 flows more than the single or the dual twos. If you go do 24 valve versus 12 valve heads, the 4 valve versus the 2 valve, the 4 valve is the same thing. If you actually look at the curtain areas, let's say it's the curtain areas on the 2, and you do all the stuff to figure out the flow numbers, they're almost identical at all lifts. I think. It's been probably a year since I did this, but it was kind of funny to find out that they are about the same. You'd have to make the 2 actually quite a bit bigger, and if you did that, if you know anything about heads, that screws up velocity because you can't make the throats any bigger. Well, if you do make the throats bigger, it gets worse. Yada 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 yada. Everything goes to crap. So I know a lot of rambling. Hopefully you guys are still paying attention, or at least putting you to sleep. But yeah, that's why the 9 works so good. That's why the bolt-in one works pretty dang good. Just that big nozzle throat in there, and we do lift the gate arm quite a bit farther than the 12. That makes a big difference. If you ever play with the 12, how far the gate arm opens, not a lot. And if you think a 12 doesn't open a lot, you should go check a .70 and a .80 T3 from Borg or any of the clones. They don't open for crap. It's like a barely anything. So the other funny thing too is like the .70 and the .80, they have a really neat re-entry design for getting the exhaust gas back behind the turbine wheel. Like I have one sit on the floor, plus I've had them in to fix them. And you would think that would work really good. The issue is actually that the gate doesn't open far enough for the volume that's on the back side of that. So what happens is that the amount of gas that it's bypassing versus that like swept volume, or whatever the heck you'd call it, passage that's in there, the passage is so big that the exhaust gas diffuses down in velocity and returns that to pressure so much by the time it gets to where the turbine wheel actually is that it doesn't seem to do anything. I haven't been able to see anything on the dyno, street driving it, no gains from that. You would look at it and you would say that must work great. But we've ran compressed air through them at high speed, we've ran water through them at high speed, and the issue is those flow holes, they're really small. There's 2 of them, one for each runner, and they're divided 70 and 80. Too small. Next, the gate doesn't open very far, and then after the gates, it gets past the gate arm and into that volume. That passage is massive. I would imagine if you drop down that passage's size quite a bit to help reduce the diffusion that's occurring in there, they probably might run better. Maybe. I'd have no interest in trying to make the 70 and 80 run better. I'd rather put my villain housing on it, but if you want to give it a try, that might do the trick to get those housings, because try flowing an air compressor through them. You want to use a big nozzle with a lot of pressure. or run water through them. Pressure washer works great. You can get a good idea of what's going on. Or compressed air and then mist, mist that you can see, and you can see kind of what's going on. And they don't. It's perpendicular. They don't want to flow in the first place. The gate arm doesn't open very far, so even when it is open, it doesn't allow a whole lot of mass flow through it, so curtain area. And then what it goes into after it gets past the gate flaps is a very big cavity, which it looks great. Like at first sight, you'd be like, okay, like more is better. But I think in this case that it's actually hurting it. It's making it not actually do how it's supposed to, because the way they re-enter it, it goes through the things, exit out into that big chamber that has the big cover plate on it, and then it snakes down and it comes up, and then here's your exit flange, and it looks fantastic. I mean, I have it on the ground and you played around with flowing through the things, and you compare how those work in comparison to how that angled gate 351 works. It is a night and day difference how much better an angled gauges. Doesn't matter if it's the 351, the Hero, an ETR and EFR that's internally gated. It is wild, and there's probably a reason why if you look at the ETR and EFRs, they do use pretty big internal gate flaps because they're meant for lower. They're basically meant to be able to gate a system down to a low pressure for spark ignition engines, but the cavities are proportional to probably the flow rating that's going to be going through those flaps. So I'm going to end this one probably right around here. Hope you guys enjoyed it. What I'm going to do before I end it is I'm going to say in the next video we'll talk about the Hero 6. That way I can go rewatch this and remember what to do. But I think that sums up the 9. There's not too much left to do. I have a new turbine wheel form that we call the Vigilante. It is a monster of a turbine wheel. We make it the very first version of it. Quite a few of them we made here. One of them's in the truck that's sitting here. It's getting auto swap. They're absolute monsters. They've already been dyno tested quite a few times. What it does is, the easy way to think about it is, it does what a head and or a cam does, but it does it over a wider spectrum, and it costs you less torque down low than what a head or a cam change would do. So they work over a wider range, increase engine volumetric efficiency, very close to, or if not equally, maybe exceeding, depending on the situation, what a head or cam change does. They do it for a lot less money. They do it for a lot less work. And especially if you're a turbo limited setup, as far as you're class limited, or you don't want to change the turbocharger, and you can see with a 3% VE gain or a 4% VE gain or whatever VE gain you need, if it's within the wheelhouse of what this thing can do. It's mainly a mid-range to top-end turbocharger, but it does give up a very small amount of spool up on the bottom end for what you get in that mid-range and top end for as far as picking up an engine VE. So a lot of those things are doable. Or say you're in a class where you already have the head and the cam done and it's turbo limited and you still need more power to compete, then we look at the turbocharger and what we can do there. Say boost stays the same, but if we can fill the cylinders better by increasing the flow on the turbine side, then that's what it's for. It's a tool, and it does a really good job at what it does do. And if you're just looking for something that sounds pretty wild, they do sound good. I cannot put any pictures of them in here, but they're cool, they're wild, and they do what they're supposed to do. We're going to have dyno videos of the Vigilante wheels, just no pictures of them. We will be comparing them to the standard wheels that we put in these things. So if you are curious about them, call or text. You can find my phone number on my website, InstaSpool Performance. It's a big cartel hosted website, so if you just put in InstaSpool Performance turbochargers, it should come right up. It's a black background with green lettering. Made it myself, and it looks like I made it myself, but it is mine. So, I hope you all have a good day. Thank you. Bye.